Hello and welcome to Gamergate Nerdcast number 2. We are going to be talking about, Gamergate stuff. We have a special guest with us today. I'm going to introduce him first. We're going to try and get through the introductions really fast like we did yesterday. We have a special guest, Mr. James Desborough. Oh, I hope I said that right. James, tell us a little bit about yourself.
It's Desborough. So close enough. I am a designer of tabletop games. I do some fiction writing and stuff on the side. I was involved in Gamergate since the start. You've mentioned the edgy designer on previous things, and that was a piss take product squarely aimed at me by somebody. So, yeah, I'm a fairly controversial game designer, I guess, more by luck than judgment.
All right, cool. We're definitely going to come back to that. Also on the panel, we have Allison. Allison.
Hello, I'm Allison, obviously, thanks to the Doge telling everybody that I am Allison. I do the Honey Badger Radio. I created, I guess, Honey Badger Radio, the idea behind it, and I also do a webcomic. It's called Xenospora. It's been described as sexy weirdness in space sort of thing. And yeah, I'll throw it back to the Doge. Go ahead, Brian.
All right, thank you. And lastly, we have Anna. Anna Cherry. Go
Hello,
ahead.
hello. I am a cosplayer and an adult entertainer. I write occasionally on contributing topics to slutty.girlproblems.com, and as well as sexual liberation and men's rights type topics on Medium, which is at Anna_Cherry. And I'm also a video gamer, tabletop gamer, and a big fangirl of that whole genre. And
Awesome.
that's it.
All right, and my name is Brian Martinez, and I normally host the BadgerPod Nerdcast, and I'm also hosting the Gamergate Nerdcast, BadgerPod Gamergate. That's what it is, BadgerPod Gamergate show. You can tell that this is early. I also do the webcomic Good Guy, and I do a lot of the illustrations for the animation stuff. So let's get right into it. So, Mr. James, tell us a little bit about some of the games that you have made that have gotten you some flack, and like some of the attention that you've gotten.
Well, how far back do you want to go?
Oh, I don't know. Let's
The way back.
Yeah, let's go all the way back, I guess.
All the way back. Okay. Well, I guess I kind of broke out by writing with my writing partner Steve Mortimer, the Munchkin's Guide to Power Gaming, which kind of kicked off the whole Munchkin phenomenon, though I don't really have anything to do with it anymore at all. Off the back of that, I got some work for some other companies like Wizards of the Coast and Mongoose Publishing, and one of the earlier things I did for Mongoose back in the early 2000s, I think, was the Slayer's Guide to Female Gamers, which was a similar sort of comedy book to how the Munchkin's Guide had been. But from the reaction that it got from, well, notably American distributors and people, you would think it was a book on how to kill women, which it wasn't at all. So I don't. Yeah, that's probably.
You have to clarify that is sad.
Yeah. So that was probably my first real encounter with this kind of crazy mindset that's been building and building over time. To try and explain what that book's about, it was kind of making fun of the sort of the stereotypical nerd, the idea that nerd boys have absolutely no idea what women are like, that they're these strange, mysterious beings that are kind of faintly scary and have strange witchy powers and stuff like that. So while the book was talking about women, it was very much targeted at the kind of stereotype of the male nerd. And people loved it. Most of the people I ended up signing books for at conventions were women. But as time has gone on, that book keeps getting brought up as somehow being a bad thing, because I don't know, something seems to have changed in people's mindset that they can't understand satire anymore. It's like even if you joke about something, making that thing the target, it's as though you're praising it and people take it seriously. I don't know. I don't understand it really. I did a few other things for Mongoose on similar lines. That was kind of jokey books. What was there? There was Quintessential Temptress, which was about the kind of seductress trope in games. There was Nymphology, which was a kind of book of sex magic, but done sort of tongue-in-cheek as well. After that, I started working on various other things, and more recently, I did the Gamergate card game, which has the dubious honour of being the first thing to ever be banned from Drive-Thru RPG. Which, considering I've done card games based around tentacle porn and stuff in the past, is a bit it's a bit of a puzzler. Really.
That was the first. I'm sorry to put butt in. That was the first game to ever get banned from Drive-Thru RPG.
Yep. First one ever. It was up for like 5 minutes or something when I uploaded it, and then was like taken down under a hail of protest, and there were people from other companies basically threatening to withdraw their products if this wasn't taken off the site, things like that. It was surprising. I don't know why it was surprising, because every so often I've done things like this, kind of poking fun and satirizing the whole social justice warrior situation. I did a card game called Privilege Check, which is basically like Top Trumps in reverse, where you're trying to be the least privileged person at the table, and people are accusing that of being racist and sexist and whatever else completely.
That is
the point. And then this kind of thing happens all the time. I think it got really vicious, not over anything I'd actually published. I think what turned everyone against me was I wrote a blog article called In Defense of Rape, which wasn't actually obviously in defense of rape itself. It was in defense of using rape as a story subject, as something in books, in fiction, as being defensible, something that's interesting, something that's powerful, something that's emotional. But people took it as if they'd only read the title and not the rest of the blog post, and I guess, since then things have been really bad, comedic, laughable in a horrible sort of way.
Not a big shocker. That I actually know about that In Defense of Rape article, because that was something that I've dealt with in terms of like storytelling, and like, well, should you be able to do that? Of course, you should be able to do that as a story element. So I read that, and I found it to be salient, and I didn't just look at the title and lose my shit like a lot of people do, because that's the kind of reactionary thinking that actually gets in the way of actual progress, or at least it just in being able to have like an open forum, an open space to like be creative, is when people just lose it, like they see the name of the article, and I'm sure it was meant to be provocative.
Oh, it was meant to be provocative. It was meant to be clickbait. I think I even said that in the first couple of lines of the article. But even so, the reaction surprised me. It disappointed me. I think I've been feeling disappointed in what I've always felt is my community. Writers, creators, artists. I've felt worried about and disappointed in those people ever since, really, and it's gotten worse and worse and worse. I mean, these are the kinds of people who you think should be standing up for free expression and the right to explore difficult topics and so on, and they all seem to be jumping on board with this. I don't know. Don't even know what to call it. Neo-puritanical bullshit, really.
Yeah, it's basically it's only considered free range as long as it's the kind of topics that they want to talk about. I'm having some problems with my microphone, but Anna, you wanted to, or Allison, I'm sorry, you wanted to say something? I'm gonna.
Yeah, actually, I had a few things to say. A comment and a question. I know that we had we have another individual who's interested in coming on as a guest, and in his case, he did a webcomic. I won't give any more details out until absolutely sure that he wants to come on, and he got nailed for the whole rape as a plot device sort of thing. Not a plot device, but as exploring rape in fiction. And in his case, he was actually describing, or he was talking about his mother had actually been raped, and he was talking about that incident. And the social justice warrior who decided to put him in her sights accused him of making that up and all kinds of things. And so they definitely have this. My personal opinion, I think that it's egregious what they're trying to do to people who bring this. There is stuff to be said about rape in fiction. That's reality, you shouldn't get rid of it as a potential source of drama or characterization or any other of these other things. And it really, to me, it speaks to their desire to just bully people. And the other question I had is, could you describe your Gamergate game a little bit more so I could get an idea of what it was about?
Okay, it's a two-player game. So one player takes the side of Gamergate, and the other player takes the side of the social justice warriors, the anti-Gamergate people. And you both get a hand of cards, and then between you play scandals, incidents, events. So you might have like the Zoe post might be an event, so that would come out in the middle, and then you vie to win that card. So the social justice side might play characters like Anita Sarkeesian, or I didn't use people's real names or anything. I tried to keep it light and comedic because I was trying to make fun of both sides, really, to be honest. So you might play personalities on it, and you're trying to build up outrage and scandal and things like that, and high enough to score the card, while the other side is trying to sabotage you or expose things and bring them to light. And so you vie over these cards, and then whoever wins the most of the events wins the game by the end.
Okay, so it sounds actually pretty inoffensive.
Yeah,
well, what I find fascinating about the whole situation is the fact that they talk about the Gamergate situation being very privileged, and yet we, the Gamergaters, are the ones getting our games pulled and our voice silenced, and yet they still somehow can continue saying that we're the privileged ones while their voice is being listened to and their demands are being met. So that whole point has a really hard time sitting with me, and how they can look at themselves in the mirror in the morning and even consider that they are fighting for something as oppressed or denigrated people when they get their way in pretty much everything.
Very much. I mean, I think the offensive part was just the name Gamergate. I think that was what triggered people, so to speak.
Well, okay, so you tried to make fun of both sides equally, but it was the anti-Gamergaters who took offense.
Yeah, I mean, well, I am biased, and that's bound to have come through in the game. I'm very much pro Gamergate. I honestly don't see how anyone who's honestly looked into it can be against it, really. Who doesn't want more ethical media and who shouldn't oppose censorship? But I guess I'm wrong. So some of my bias is going to come across in there, and maybe the punches thrown at Gamergate were a little bit lighter, but they're just not as good comedy fodder because they're not as up themselves.
Yeah, well, they aren't as self-righteous, which doesn't make as amusing a figure to mock. And I was gonna say something else. You're right. This is it really is about censorship and opposing censorship and freedom of speech and journalistic ethics. But they want to make it about women, because if they make it about women, then they can twist it into a threat narrative and pound you guys down with it, basically. But go ahead,
exactly.
Anna.
Sorry. What I've been noticing in my Twitter feed, because I do follow a few prominent people in media who are, of course, anti-Gamergate because they have basically corporate interests to protect. But I see a lot of vitriol against Gamergaters in the sense that they're making fun of not only physical appearance of people who want ethics in journalism, but they've been making fun of the whole concept. Over and over, I've been seeing this barrage of, "Oh, tell me again about how it's ethics in journalism," while having a picture of an alien breathing into Sigourney Weaver's face and things like that. Just having very angry, not taking seriously the fact that it is about ethics. And there's all these articles that came out saying how there is no ethics in journalism because every single journalist comes with a biased perspective, and so the whole idea that that those people are claiming for ethics in journalism, they're just covering up their misogyny, and so there's a tremendous amount of voice given to those people who claim that Gamergate is about misogyny, and voice given to people who basically make fun of all of our attempts at serious conversation. And I think that's why we're here now, and why everyone just sees Gamergate and they immediately think misogyny, because no voice was given to us as Gamergaters. We only listen to that other side, and yet they're still somehow the oppressed ones. It just makes no sense to me.
I think there's sorry, can I go ahead? Okay.
Yep.
I think there's valid discussions to be had about representation in media and so on, but I think creators' rights have to come first, and I think the disagreement really between most Gamergaters and most anti-Gamergaters isn't over a desire for progress and difference and better games. It's a disagreement over the methodology, in that anti-Gamergate seems to be quite authoritarian and Gamergate seems to be quite small L libertarian. I think that's where the divide is, but it's being dressed up as left-right, and the mainstream media is lazy, really. There's this pre-existing narrative of women in tech having problems, women in STEM fields, harassment in nerd space and so on. It's far easier to recycle that old story and call up the same people and get the same talking heads than it is to actually investigate and find out what it's really about,
Yeah, definitely. Oops, sorry, Doge.
No, it's okay. No, I was just saying I agree with that. I think that it is an authoritarian versus libertarian thing more than anything else, and I also think that sometimes I believe that there is, to some degree, the journalists, the media, that's starting with the game media, who all they have they're good friends with people in larger media spaces, and they're making connections with them. It's all it sounds all tinfoil hat, but it seems like they all know each other on some level, or they have degrees of separation that are close enough that they can go to them for help. That's why whenever Gamergate seems to pick up ground, Anita Sarkeesian appears on ABC News, or even though this isn't about her, but they keep making it about her. The major news outlets do it, and sometimes I think it's does all the media in general not want us to take a closer look at them, and instead they want to basically make this about something that it isn't, just for the sake of doing that, for that cover-up. It just, this sort of stuff just turns my stomach. This censorship, this authoritarian, way of talking, and it only serves to make the people doing it feel better about themselves. I mean, they can't really win at this. They don't have a win state. Like, they're just going to keep doing this shit. So that's all. I'm sorry.
Yeah. If nobody else is going to talk, I just have to say, whenever you start talking, Brian, I always have this incredible urge to pet your nose.
Feel free.
It's just not the same when you're petting a screen.
Touch the screen. That's fine.
It's the cold, hard breath of technology. It's just not the same as petting the soft, downy fur of the Doge, as it were. Anyway, that's just completely random. I apologize. Okay. Well, why don't we ask you another question, James? What are your more recent projects? Let's go into maybe a happier territory you might like to talk about.
Well, a bit over a year ago, I went into business. Because previously I've been working for myself, but recently I've gone into business with Chronicle City, which is a new company setting up here in the UK. And I did a lot of work setting up for that, but we had some issues, so a lot of work's been delayed. So it's quite frustrating, really, because there's a lot of stuff I've done that I can't talk about that's in the pipeline, but is unfortunately delayed. There's a couple of things I can talk about. I completed writing a licensed role-playing game based on the Gore property by John Norman, which you can imagine, if you know anything about it, has stirred people up a bit. And right now I'm working on more Adventure Seeds books, which is like help books for games masters, for just brief ideas for them to expand into games. and a game based on sort of B-movie Japanese horror gore films called Kagai, which I'm about 75% of the way through. So those are my current projects.
When you say Japanese gore movies, are you talking about stuff like Machine Girl and like Robo Geisha?
Yes.
Oh my God, those movies are so much fun.
And Rape Zombie, Lust of the Dead, and Hell Driver, Returner, stuff like that. All that really over the top.
Yes, I love that shit. That sounds like fun. See, I like these sorts of, I mean, really, like niche kind of games that are really out there. Like one of the ones I used to love from my youth was Macho Women with Guns, and that game would probably get so much shit today. I mean, it's still around.
Yeah, I've got that in my bookshelf, and I wrote the D20 version of that actually.
Oh, you did?
D20 boom.
Oh
yeah,
shit! I didn't know there was a D20 version of that. I might have to check it out.
It got edited to hell.
Yeah, well, that's just it, So that's just I guess the nature of when something becomes bigger and more popular and more mainstream, it inevitably gets watered down as a result. You add water to it, and that's sort of an unfortunate side effect. I got a question about your Gamergate game. How well did it do? Like, is it something that people can still get? Did it, I know that you said it got taken off of the drive-through RPG market, but did you, is there some other way to get it? Because I'd like to have it, actually.
It's really hard to gauge how well it's done or how well it's gone, because, like I said, it was only up on drive-through for like 5-10 minutes, and that's definitely the major market to sell on. The other sites after drive-through refused it, followed suit, so you can't get it on Paizo's electronic store, and you can't get it on E23 either. I've got a Gumroad link on my blog, which is postmortemstudios.wordpress.com. So if you look there, you can get the electronic download there, and there's a hard copy version from the Game Crafter, which is a brilliant site actually, where you can run off your own board games to your own designs. It's great for proofing and stuff. So yeah, shout out to them, because that's a really cool site. But the downside of Game Crafter is that it's really expensive to ship anything outside the United States or North America anyway. So if you live abroad from America, it's not such a great option. But yeah, you can get the stuff there.
Have you tried just going directly to Amazon, or maybe like getting a girlfriend to put up a Kickstarter and then let us harass her so that she makes $200,000 so that the game can get published?
I could put on a wig, shave my legs, and start a Patreon, I suppose.
There you go.
I'm still looking into solutions. I haven't tried Amazon. As far as I know, Amazon doesn't do card games, and I don't think they offer the kind of electronic format. It's been a while since I looked at Amazon's electronic publishing options, but I can have a look.
Well, the whole game being banned and that whole situation just really drives home the point. Feminists do have one point correct. Most men that are oblivious to this issue, that they are stupid, period. They are allowing for women to completely pull the wool over their eyes and to just win in the social environment of this victimhood situation. You don't see any men that actually take, well, except you guys, of course, very few men actually take a rational look and don't immediately go for the emotional argument that women have conditioned them into following over and over. I will agree with feminists on that aspect, that typical men who do not look at feminism critically are stupid. Period. Just stupid, because at this point we see over and over, painfully obvious, that it is about control and manipulation and not about anything fair. It's not about having equal rights. They repeatedly laugh in the face of anything to do with equality. At what point are men going to wake up and realize that they are being fooled and these women are laughing at them?
I don't know that they are.
You don't know that the men are being fooled, or that the men aren't waking up, or that... Could you clarify?
I don't know that they're going to wake up. what's the saying? Don't attribute to malice what can be attributed to incompetence.
Which can be adequately explained by stupidity. Yes.
Yeah. So, I mean, people talk about. You hear feminists talk about social conditioning and so on, and how we're pushed into particular gender roles, and there's something to that. I think women's roles in society have broadened a huge amount since I don't know 1970s to pick a year out of a hat. But men's attitudes, men's position in society hasn't developed on the same way. So while men have lost privileges, they haven't lost obligations, and we're still very much socialized to protect, provide, look after, to listen and believe, for want of another phrase, and that's a very hard thing to overcome. And if you're a guy that does treat women equitably the same way you treat men, that's often perceived as sexist. And I think there's a lot of fear in a lot of guys that I do not want to be seen this way. I don't want to be considered an MRA or MHRA, or I don't want to be considered a sexist, or I'm not a sexist, so I better act this way to prove that I'm not. It's very, if you want to be seen as a progressive, liberal, cool guy, it's performative. It's something you have to do constantly, all the time. I mean, I consider myself far left, progressive, anarchist, but this modern, authoritarian, puritanical group calling themselves progressive and left don't feel progressive or left to me. I mean, all this puritanical bullshit feels like a great leap backwards to the 1950s, and it's really threatening to knock back so many freedoms of expression and sexual expression that we've gained since the 60s. Honestly, it terrifies me. I feel a bit lost.
Well, I'd just like to point something out. If you look at traditional gender roles, or so-called traditional gender roles around the world, it generally can boil down to women receive men's actions. And that's pretty common across the cultures. You think about yin and yang and other principles of masculine and feminine. It's sort of, you could consider that sort of the traditional way we look at gender. And what feminists have created is essentially women receive the actions of men, but only when it's absolutely and utterly and completely negative. Only when women are victims and men are villains. I mean, it's still the same traditional gender role. It's just a man can no longer be a hero. A woman can no longer inspire a man to be heroic, except in some sort of almost shadowy way, unless he's, I guess, feminist as well. So, but it's still the same traditional. They're not progressive. The only so-called progressive aspect of it is that it's a profoundly cynical and negative look at a very traditional way of viewing gender. So, I'm not surprised you don't find them to be this monolith of authoritarians with their incredibly traditional view of gender. By reducing women down to victims and men to villains, it's still reducing women down to being acted upon and men actors. I'm not surprised you find them to be less than truly progressive and less than truly liberal, because they're not. They're arch conservatives. Without any of, because I actually really like in my own personal life, I prefer to hang around with conservatives because they tend to have a lot more of their shit in their life in order, but these are like arch conservatives with all of the dogmatic authoritarian self-righteousness of so-called humanitarian liberals who don't really don't ever doubt or question the things that they try to ram down people's throats. So it's like, not only are you not liberal, and what your values are not progressive in any sense of the word, they're deeply, deeply conservative, but you're also incredibly authoritarian about them. So there you go. I agree with you, James. But Brian Doge.
Yes.
Should we invite our interlopers, our stowaways?
Yeah. I just one final point. Essentially, it's the Pac-Man door of of liberalism. Like they go so far to the left, they come in on the other side. And that's so that's what I think of it as. It's the Pac-Man door. They just went in through the left side and came out on the right side.
Well, they don't examine anything.
Right,
They don't
because they're that's what I'm saying. Like you start with the premise that you think that there are certain things that exist, like the concept of privilege and the progressive stack, and though you follow that and like all of the history that you've been taught through our feminized education system and everything that you consume through the media, which also has a slant, pretty heavily, and then you carry that with you, and you basically are liberal in that you think that all this information you've been given is the basis for which everything that you want to fix is based on this bundle of knowledge that you've gotten from these very limited, very sort of one-sided, incomplete myths and half-truths. And maybe there are some truths in there, but it's kind of hard to fiddle through it all and figure out where they are. And then you push that enough, and then it gets to the point where when you get to a point where you are trying to restrict other people or other groups or other creatives from doing something that runs counter to the narrative that you are already feeding on, that you've already grown accustomed to. So I'm going to that's all I wanted to say about that. I'm sorry if that sounded really squiddly or whatever. I want to introduce the other panelists that have joined us before we go to a great question that someone put in, but I'm going to let her speak for herself on that. But first, let me go down the line. So, Nephanor, our resident alien, why don't you introduce yourself, please?
Well, I am a longtime gamer, actually having some of James's books on the shelves, and in Gamergate myself since the beginning, just general nerd overall.
Yes, and that is awesome. And next we have the observing libertarian, sir.
I think the observing libertarian is just observing right now. So
Oh, he's just observing. Well, then
let's move on.
Pay no attention to the grassy knoll on the hill over there, guys. Then there's Sour Grape.
Oh, how y'all doing today? I'm just gonna play devil's advocate for a bunch of and I have a really weird question. I was listening to you, James. How you doing, James? And I want to know if there could be another reason. You mentioned Puritans and they do scare me too, just a little bit. They don't like certain topics and how certain topics aren't suitable for a narrative. And I've read responses to your blog post, and some of them were they're just worried about using rape in the narrative. What would happen? Would someone freak out? Is this appropriate? I understand that. But then again, there are other people who said, why should companies take a risk on this strong theme in an RPG? Do you have a response for that?
Okay, there's a lot to unpack in that. I'll try and be succinct.
All right.
I think a lot of companies are risk averse, but I think that the tabletop RPG industry has shrunk to the point where risk often pays off. I mean, you look at things like Zach Smith's work. It's very risky in terms of presentation, in terms of content. When he works with James Raggy, he's quite into his hardcore horror stuff. So a lot of risks are taken there. And that's paid off for them, but that's on a very small scale. I think the risk aversity only really comes in when you're talking about the larger companies. So Wizards, for example, especially now that they're owned by Hasbro, Hasbro's got a family-friendly brand, so it's probably a lot more difficult for them to handle risky topics. But the beauty of the indies is that the bar is now so low to produce a game and get it out there, as long as you don't mind not making a profit, that there's plenty of room for people to take risks. It's just they're not so much taking risks on these kind of topics, and these are the things that interest me. Sex and violence, things that people are a little squeamish about. I mean, I say violence. Most games have elements of violence, but I mean horrific violence. You know, so I mean, I get called edgy designer, but I'm into these things because they interest me, because I find them interesting, and that's why I do it. Not to be deliberately edgy or anything. Um, Tackling topics like rape. Certainly, I've heard from people who criticised that article. I mean, when they back off a bit from saying, "Oh, this should never be done," when I bring up examples like *The Handmaid's Tale* or something, which is basically a science fiction book entirely about institutionalized rape, but it's seen as a great work of feminist literature, you know. So once you point out something like that, they back away from it, and they say, "Well, no, we just don't want people to do it badly. We want it done right." Well, that's too subjective a measure, and I think people need to be free to screw up as well as to succeed. Yes, you know, because otherwise you can't learn. So I don't know. On the one hand, I mean, looking at Gamergate, you see some of the opposition to that, and you see the same thing in tabletop, where they're saying, "Oh, we want the medium to mature, we want it to tackle adult subjects," but then at the same time, not wanting people to tackle adult subjects in a way that they don't like. So.
Or could it just be that there's not, I don't know necessarily if there's a market for that, because they might be seeing it not only in a puritanical way, which is annoying, but, you know, in a monetary way. Does someone really want to buy this if it's about this subject?
I think there's at least a niche market for just about anything. I mean, you've got some really miserable little indie games out there that are just the topics are horrible and have no appeal to me whatsoever. But
you're telling me I play art games.
But yeah, they appeal to other people, and they buy them and they play them, and I don't begrudge them at all. It's just not to my taste, so I don't buy it, and I don't see why that's such a difficult solution for people, you know, to avoid things you don't like.
Yep.
So, yeah, I mean that's about all I can really say on that.
Thank you, though. That was a good answer.
Observing libertarian?
You can stop observing now.
Yeah. Going back to what Brian had said about the Pac-Man door, when you go so far left, you just come out on the other screen. It's actually the geopolitical landscape. If you look at politics in terms of less of a map left and right, more of a globe, in the center you have your rights and your freedoms, and when you deviate from that, you go right, in which case you go to your dictators, regimes, that kind of thing. You go left and you go into communism. Now, the closer you stay to the center, the less these things are. So that's where you get your Marxism, that's where you get your republicanism, libertarianism, corporatism. But once you go too far afield from the center, you end up coming to the backside of this whole landscape, which is always totalitarianism. Doesn't matter in which direction you go, if you go too far, you end up on the backside of the circle. You end up in totalitarian territory, where you are restricting the freedoms of people instead of enhancing them. But you're always going to find whatever regime is doing it is going to do it in the interest of enhancing their political landscape, of enhancing freedoms as they see them. And a great example of going so far left that you run into totalitarian territory would be Dollhouse University and St. Mary's University management professor Judy Haven, where she literally proposed the idea and is conducting in her own classrooms. She allows all the women to speak first in classrooms, to ask their question first, to make their comments first, to discuss issues first. She allows all the female students to speak first, and then the men get to talk. So the men are literally at the back of the bus. Keep that concept in mind. She is proposing that the same thing be done in order to combat sexism. So in order to combat sexism, she's forcing the men to the back of the bus. And that's because she's promoting her misogynist ideology, that men are innately misogynist and that men dominate everything because of the patriarchy, blah, 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 blah. But she's gone so far afield to the left, she's ended up becoming the very totalitarianism that she is supposedly fighting against. She is a sexist bigot who is forcing all her male students to the back of the bus. They get to speak when they get their turn. You speak last. This is a real-life example of this concept at work today. Never mind the fact that women are over 60% of the enrollees in universities. Never mind the fact that women get most of the PhDs. They get an overwhelming majority of the number of diplomas per year. Women are first and foremost at all levels of education. And yet, in order to further combat misogyny, she's making all her male students go to the back of the bus. If you go too far afield in any one direction, you end up becoming the very totalitarian that you supposedly are fighting against. It is the Pac-Man screen. You go too far from the center, this is what happens. And it has real-life consequences on people's lives.
Yeah, that's exactly my point. And you're being chased by ghosts the whole time. Because you can't let go of the past. Right? That's the ghosts. So,
Pac-Man. Nice metaphors.
I know. Pac-Man predicted the SJW.
Everything. Well,
Yeah.
personally, I like to, instead of being in the middle and lukewarm middle between left and right, I like to bend the bar all the way on the other side and meet at the other middle. Have very radical conservative ideas and have very radical liberal ideas and have them all together in one. But speaking of bigotry and basically feminism being patriarchy and lipstick, which is a great quote that I like, is the fact that, oh, sorry, I totally jumped over Brian. Sorry, go ahead, Brian.
Oh no, it's okay. The only thing I was just gonna add was Sauer was talking about the risk averse nature, and James was talking about how the bigger companies tend to lean that way, and I think that there's a lot of truth to that. But I mean that is because typically the people like Wizards and these larger publishers of these tabletop games, and maybe even like the folks that do like the HeroClix and stuff, they're interested in getting the largest number of buyers possible because their company's gotten so big that they almost have to keep it afloat. Like that's the problem with companies that get bigger and bigger. But I don't think that that's okay. Like I think that one of the benefits is that those large companies are making a choice to do that. Now they have pushed the envelope to some degree in the 3rd edition, I believe, or maybe it was 3.5 of Dungeons and Dragons. I believe it was 3rd though. They made a book called The Book of Vile Darkness, and in it they went into things like
3.5
sexuality and what was it? It was 3.5.
It's 3.5. The Book of Vile Darkness.
The Book of Vile Darkness. And the other one, the Book of Exalted Deeds. But the Book of Vile Darkness.
2.5.
Yeah, that one went into things like sexuality and nudity and even implied things like rape and real vile stuff. Like they considered that to be the worst of the worst. But they did go there, but they made that optional. And I think that was about as risky as they probably would have gone. But I think that what the important thing to maintain is that it's absolutely true that these larger companies would do that because they want to play it safe because there is a force that would basically could ruin them, and so they're aware of it, and so they're playing it safer. And the smaller companies, they're risking less, so they don't care as much. But some of them can make it really big. I was just talking in the chat about Cards Against Humanity, which the whole purpose of Cards Against Humanity was to offend as many people as possible. And one would think that, or at least people of this sort of social justice mindset or progressive mindset would think that a game like Cards Against Humanity should not succeed because it should not be allowed to because it's wrong, but it's hugely popular. And everyone who does gaming knows what it is. And the publishers are seriously a few blocks from my house, and they're tiny. Well, they were tiny when they started out. They didn't even have artwork on the cards. That's how simple it is. Because that's all they could do. And yes, they did go after the designer a little bit though, and he did end up, kind of pulling a few of his cards. but I think that's only because he's getting bigger. And so, because originally they probably, if they would have stayed small, they probably would have taken more risks. And I think that one of the great things about this sort of the free market of ideas with regards to gaming is that, for the most part, people that are in the industry that are working on stuff do not try to control what people buy. Like, they allow all of this stuff to exist. So if somebody wants to make a My Little Pony RPG, which I'm sure is out there, then that's fine. And nobody's gonna give a shit. And on the other hand, if somebody wants to make one that's just like everybody plays penises and vaginas and they just chase each other like a game of tag or whatever, then that should also be allowed to exist as well, and that should be fine. And it's
not only should it be allowed to exist, it should exist. Not only should it not be allowed to exist, it should exist.
It should exist, yes.
It should.
It should be called.
I have a problem with that, though, because now this is my dilemma. It's, who do we listen to more? We listen to the consumer when it comes to situations, or do we listen to the company? Say I make a kinky, crazy, furry RPG. I bet you there's one out there. And the company says, well, there's not really a market for this. Are they necessarily censoring me because, it's a moral thing to do because the consumer says, well, I'm not going to buy that, that's immoral? Or is it monetary? Because now there's a problem, because we're saying, well, if a big company doesn't want, because their bottom dollar is at stake, that's no issue. But when it comes to morality, it is an issue. Like, I don't really see where we should draw the line there, if the line should even be drawn.
I've been banging on about this for a while, but I think the biggest threat to a lot of free expression does not actually lie with governments any longer. It lies very much on a handful of companies that represent choke points.
Yep.
For getting your work out there to an audience, and if that company refuses to represent you and refuses to sell your product, you may as well not be doing it. So, like getting the Gamergate card game pulled from drive-through, that's a choke point. That's a retail site that if you can't get on it, you pretty much may as well not be in business unless you've definitely got other channels for doing it. Amazon is another issue. They've done things like delisting self-published books, delisting erotica, delisting sex toys, things like that, which are all legal to buy, but they just kind of they get hidden away. We've seen similar problems with banks where they hold the money that porn actresses have made and refuse to give them their money, or refuse to serve them, or refuse to let them open an account because they define it loosely as somehow as immoral earnings or something. So there was a big problem with PayPal through. They were refusing to handle money from erotica writing, which I've done a little bit of. So we had a big campaign to try and get PayPal to essentially not censor people. Yeah, but it's a tricky question. At what point do you step in and you require a company to act as a guarantor of people's rights? Because free expression is a right. It's a fundamental human right according to the UN, the EU, the American Constitution, and anywhere else you care to speak of. So at what point do we step in and say, a company must, act as a guardian of these rights to people, or at what level do we say, it's your company, it's your business? We already intervene when a company refuses to say serve black people or gay people. We say, no, you can't do that. They have a right to be served. But doesn't everyone, to an extent, have a right to get their products out there, get their words out there, have the right to free expression? In Marxist terms, I guess we've lost control of the means of communication.
Well, yeah, I mean, typically when these sorts of things happen, the solution comes from, if you can't get your game distributed through company A and it has potential to make a lot of money, then you just do it through company B, who is willing to distribute your product. And they're, I mean...
Did we just lose Brian? Doge! Doge, we've lost you! We've lost the Doge! Oh no, it's a canarchy now. Yeah, and I'm reading from the chat. You had a comment there, Anna, that this is the Hobby Lobby contraceptive issue that got passed in the U.S. Did you want to elaborate on that at all? Or?
Well, a little bit, I guess. Just mainly the lines are definitely getting blurred already. The line is blurred, I guess, to begin with. Where do we start to determine what the government has a right to step in, and where do we determine where the company itself has certain rights or certain obligations? If they're in the public eye, then is it just one company owner who has a right to decide whatever they want, or do they have a bigger responsibility? There's, I really don't exactly know the answer to that specifically without going into any kind of like communist, Marxist, whatever, all of that stuff. But I did have a point earlier on misogyny or actually misandry of feminism to the point of Jonathan McIntosh, I believe that's his first name. Nobody really talks about, and Sarkeesian herself doesn't really talk about the fact that sure, she might get some hate here and there, but she doesn't have a full Sarkeesian hashtag, does she? In fact, there's more hate and more ridicule lobbed at McIntosh than there is at Sarkeesian sometimes, and that has never been brought up, yet she's so eager to talk about all the abuses that she suffers. And so this is the second half of your feminist frequency, and he is getting bullied just as much, and yet you're not even bringing that to light because of virtue that he's a man, and it's just kind of disgusting.
Okay, so just to clarify, we're talking about Anita Sarkeesian's husband or boyfriend.
I'm not sure what their relationship is, but he is the producer of Feminist Frequency. So it's actually Feminist Frequency is, as much as I understand, a two-person thing. It's Sarkeesian and McIntosh, and she's in front of the camera and he's behind the camera. And
well, that's actually a really good point. If he is on the receiving end of a lot of this aggressive hatred, and they don't bring it up. Well, of course they don't bring it up because it ruins the narrative.
Exactly, but he does. There's a hashtag called going full Macintosh, which means just being so completely crazy and out of your mind that you're just gone full Macintosh. And that's his last name, and it's entirely making fun of this person to a bigger extent than almost Sarkeesian's made fun of.
Well, here are some questions that arise when I hear that. And James, if you want to jump in here, feel free to go ahead and do that at any point. But here are some of my questions that sort of come to mind. One, well, first of all, it ruins their narrative, but why is it that he's expected to deal with a greater amount of hatred directed at him, but she isn't? Like, why is she not held to the same standard of I guess you would call it manning up? Well, y'all know the answer to that, of course, and why don't they ever look at that and ask themselves, well, if you hold men to a higher standard of just rolling with the punches, don't be upset when men are better at rolling with the punches and get more kudos for rolling with the punches. But the other thing is that if they are, like, I assume, I'm not sure, I'm a little bit fuzzy on Anita and her various doings, but if they are in a romantic relationship, doesn't she give a shit about him? Like, does she not? Does the aggression that's directed at him not even register on her radar? Why is she constantly creating this narrative that this aggression is purely female? I mean, you have an example right in front of you of someone who's receiving this aggression, which, you know, personally, I don't believe in two wrongs make a right, so, you know, I don't believe that he should necessarily be receiving this. Well, he probably deserves it, but, you know, deserve and should happen are two different things. But anyway, but the thing is that if he is receiving this aggression and she is promoting this narrative that it doesn't happen to men, or it's trivial when it happens to men, or whatever, that's sort of cuntish. That's sort of cunty. No, does anyone want to chime in on that?
Yeah, I was going to say that's the big question, isn't it? Is there a need for women to man up, or is there a need for men to girl down about this? Should we be talking more about the harassment we get? Because we know statistically that men get about as much harassment online as women get, albeit of a slightly different nature. And if I'm remembering right, the biggest target of online abuse is 19-year-old men. So maybe we should talk more about it. I don't know. I mean, I've had some horrible shit done to me, but it still feels difficult to talk about it, and not only because it's depressing, but because you're going to be accused of whining or lying, and because you're a man, it's going to be discounted. I mean, I've been essentially blacklisted by some companies. I've had petitions telling companies not to employ me. I had a razor blade sent to my home address shortly after a suicide attempt. I've been signed up to God knows how many spam sites that made my email unusable for a couple of weeks. And yet, most of the time, I don't make a huge fuss about it. And a lot of guys, I think, don't make a huge fuss about it, and that's part of the reason it's invisible. So maybe we should not be so stalwart. Maybe we should talk more about it. I
Okay, just a question. So you were experiencing a suicidal, and they sent a razor blade to your house?
A couple of days after I had a kind of breakdown, which is why I kind of backed down out of Gamergate for a bit. I have long-term problems with severe depression, but I try not to let it stop me doing anything.
Yeah.
So a few days after that, I got a razor blade in the post, and then stupidly I just destroyed it and got rid of it because it freaked me out. I should have kept it and called the cops, but
Yeah.
if it happens again, I will. But yeah, just in the moment, you don't think. Sorry, I'm getting a bit upset.
That's okay. You can take as much time as you need. That's unbelievable, and this is what this narrative hides. It hides a great deal of pain, and yeah, that's. I agree. I think. Well, I don't know if you were saying that, but I think that men should speak out more because, to be honest, from what I've heard, men get it more. They get more of the very aggressive kind of harassment, the very nasty and sinister kind of harassment. And because, I mean, like, I talk out about feminists and social justice warriors, you can very easily find my phone number and my home address. I don't really hide it. I think they're on a Whois site on Whois search away on one of the sites that I manage, and nothing. I haven't really gotten anything. I had one extremely creepy person who was pretending to be a Warhammer character talk about killing me, but aside from that, he termed it a mercy kill, and it was creepy. But aside from that, I've never really experienced a really aggressive harassment, and I know part of that is because I'm a woman. And the reality is that, well, I shouldn't say that. What I perceive is that women are protected from this kind of behavior. We actually have a unique protection from it. And if you look at it, let's look at it in terms of dead bodies. If you look at the way that people are killed in the Middle East, to use an example, and only using it because it's a area that's generally, I think most people can agree upon, is quite rife with war. But and I'm citing feministcritics.org, which is a fantastic website. So do take a look at that website. They did an analysis of people being killed in Middle Eastern conflict, and what they found was the more control the aggressor had over the target, the more control the killer had over who he or she killed, the more likely they chose a man. So if they were a suicide bomber, it was usually 50-50. If they were it's just small arms fire, it started to get more like 70% male. Snipers, you're looking at 90% male because they have the ability to choose their targets, a very great ability to choose their targets. And then kidnappers is like 95% male. And then once you got to like murder, torture, kidnappings, it was like 99% male. And each step of the way, when the person had the choice to escalate the violence, they would choose not to if it was the target was a woman or potentially a woman, but they would choose to if the target was a man. And nobody talks about that. Nobody talks about how men are treated as expendable, and this is an example of it. I mean, if this happened to Anita, we'd never hear the end of it. It'd be another $200,000. Anita receives a razor blade in her mail after expressing mental health issues, and it would probably be in like Newsweek and everywhere. They'd be doing interviews. There would be a manhunt for the person who sent it.
The NFL would have to wear a special armband, and there'd be a holiday. Everybody would take the day off of work, and she'd get a bunch of money thrown at her.
There'd probably be like razor walks or something.
Well, lest we forget, there's plenty of women and men involved in Gamergate that have been doxxed, threatened, had hypodermics and stuff sent to their homes, been swatted. But even the women, they don't get any of the attention that the Sarkeesians and so on have got. I think intellectually, we all know that the vast and overwhelming majority of these threats and things are spurious and are never going to amount to anything. And I think anyone that's been on the internet for any real length of time, knows how to spot a troll and knows what to do. You just ignore them. But kind of bringing this back onto games for a sec, I think this is part of why it's certainly part of why I have so much resentment towards these social justice warriors, is that games for me have always been an escape, a way to get away from bullying or some kind of failure in life, just a break from the endless depressing grind of reality. And they want to bring all this real world bullshit into my safe space, for want of a better term. I want a place where I can be invincible, where I can be the hero, where I can rescue the princess or whatever, and they want to take that away. No wonder people get upset when you intrude on that.
Well, one thing that I've been thinking about a lot is, if you look at role-playing in general, it tends to be a male-centric area. Sure, there are women who role-play, but they are the exception rather than the rule. So if you really look at it that way, you have to think perhaps role-playing and tabletop is a male safe space. And here they are invading it, trying to attack it and trying to destroy it, just like they claim that we're doing to them.
Right, except the important difference is that when we wouldn't call it a safe space because gamers would, they're not averse to letting anybody in as long as they want to enjoy it for what it is as it is, right? I mean, that's sort of like when it becomes unsafe, is when people, regardless of whether they're male or female or gay or straight or black or white or whatever, but when people want to come in to an environment that thrived and grew because of the group of people, whether they were outcast or ostracized, by the public eye, and they built it up and they spent money and they put money in, and some of them became adults and started making their own content, and then people who sort of like we might consider them to be kind of outsiders will come in because it's become, now it's profitable, now it's big, now it's making money, and they come in and they want to change everything, they want to throw their weight around. That's when it feels unsafe. But I think, I get what you're saying, because basically they're being hypocritical, Nephenor, because they would want to call their spaces safe spaces. I remember a girl I knew, well, I still know, she was like a super hardcore feminist, and I had class with her, and we got along for some fucking reason. But she said she expressed disappointment, and she was upset. At one point, I guess Jezebel's comment section became something that was accessible to anyone that went to any Gawker sites. So they sort of like connected them all together. So people who were not, that never visited Jezebel and could normally not comment, were suddenly able to comment, even if they went to IO9 or Kotaku or some other website that was connected to Gawker. And she got upset about that, and I said, well, what's the big deal? People are coming in and they're basically giving their thoughts on like the crazy ass articles that you guys, or not you guys, but like that Jezebel has up there. And she basically said, in her own words, well, Jezebel was supposed to be a safe space. And I think that's where the important difference is that when people like her, because I'm not going to say feminists, I think that this is sort of broader than that, that want, they want to keep the conversation in their little hug box, and they don't want to get like opposing views or alternate views or even broadening, views to like be put upon them. They feel attacked or like that someone is invading their safe space, but they don't want anyone in there. They're not interested in people coming in unless they already agree with everything. But generally, gamers in this context of tabletop and stuff, they love the idea of more people taking interest in their hobby because it helps them socialize, because that's sort of like one of the ways that they do it is through the game itself, or it's sort of like they're basically saying, look, this is this thing that I'm really passionate about and I really, really love, and you are becoming interested in it, and I really want you to see why I love this thing just as much. And as long as you can, get involved in under that pretense, or like, then we're going to be cool. But if you come in and say, well, everything that you're doing I don't like because it offends me or it bothers me or I find it, icky or whatever, so I'm going to be here, but you got to change everything. And so that's where the really important distinction is that there's a difference between wanting to add to a conversation and then wanting to change the conversation or even change the topic altogether. And that's when it becomes really destructive.
If you don't mind, I'd like to actually comment on something that James said. I think there is a case that when you do abdicate your role of victim as a woman, you tend to get in for a lot of shit, which I think is what is happening at the Gamergate. The women in Gamergate are refusing to kowtow to this. Oh, it's about women. It's about women, and they need to be. We need to see how the community affects women, and we need to judge the community on how it's affect women. And many of the women in the community are saying, "Fuck that! I'm here to game. I'm not here to be some point-scoring point thing that you score points on."
Well, because they don't want to be treated differently.
Yeah, they don't want to be treated differently. And when you actually reject that role as a woman, you do end up getting harassment for it. When you say, I'm not going to submit to being your victim, your damsel, and it's absurd and it's irrational, and I'll explain exactly why it's absurd and irrational, what you're attempting to foist upon me in terms of an identity as a woman. And then people go apoplectic. I mean, to use a recent example that not everybody may have watched, but Senk and our own Karen Strawn, him in the end pretty much.
Oh my God, I can't wait.
Oh yeah, do we want to talk about that or?
Yes, but
yes.
But James has one more thing he wants to say, and then we got to talk about Senk and what's his fucking and Karen.
Yeah, I was just going to say, I think I've identified what the common thread is between all these groups that have been kind of infiltrated and fucked over. So, we've had problems in atheism, we've had problems in tabletop gaming, we've had problems in computer gaming, we've had problems in tech communities and so on. And I think the common thread in all of these kind of geek media nerd groups that have had all these issues over the past 5-10 years is that they're all incredibly welcoming. They don't care. They're all very evangelical. They want people to like what they're into. They'll welcome anybody in with open arms and say, this thing that we do is really, really cool, and we want more people to do it. So when someone turns up who you don't necessarily agree with, you put it to one side and you don't care. You're interested in, like you said, you're here to game. So I think that gives people an in, and then the communities are so mindful of the fact that they want to be welcoming to people that they go out of their way to be accommodating. They'll change things, and before you know it, it's not your community anymore.
Yep, and the women who fight against that, I agree, they come in for a lot of shit. because they refuse to submit to the narrative that's going to end up destroying their community and destroying what they love. And I think the ones who are smarter recognize that. They recognize what's going on. So shall we talk about okay, there's two things that we could talk about Doge. Anita getting a humanitarian award from the Humanitarian Society of Harvard.
She's not a human. I can confirm this.
Oh, yeah, well, apparently they can't. Or maybe they're all reptilians or something. But yeah, let me see. It's on their Pop Culture Activist Harvard Humanist of the Year 2014.
Yeah. I don't know that there's much to say because Anita. I think this is what I mean. I'm starting to believe that Anita's just being given trophies just so that they can write articles about her getting trophies from various groups, because she won something like a year ago from like some gaming convention with a bunch of fucking white knight manginas, and I think that they do that to incite rage, and so that Gamergate reacts to it, or people who react to Anita react to it vocally, and then you get like, you know, the most easily offended, most angry people coming on, and then she gets to go, oh look, I need cops to protect me because these guys didn't like the fact that I won this trophy for being such a great human being. And we know that trophy has no value because we know the people who gave it to her didn't actually do their research, because there's plenty of shit out there debunking her. So I don't know. I mean, unless one of you guys has something to say about Anita and this winning this award, I'm so over her already, you know? Like,
I'm over her.
Yeah. Well, apparently the world isn't.
I was over her when we first started talking about the whole Gamergate issue. My podcast from about 4 months ago that I did first ever came out, and right there, plain as day, I'm like, why are we still talking about her? And that was 4 months ago, and we still haven't shut up about her. We need to stop giving her the limelight because that's what she thrives on.
Well, I mean, she throws herself, but she throws herself in the limelight too. I mean, that's part of the problem, is that the mainstream media and gaming media will make it about her, even if everyone that's like on the side of the hashtag for the consumer revolt and the invasion of politicized gaming and the censorship and all of these other issues, if all of them just stop talking about her tomorrow, she will basically continue to make it about her, just like the others, just like the other literally who's that have tried to like jump on the bandwagon and use this, you know, to their advantage, because they serve as very useful tools to disrail the argument because they are women, and that we have like a propensity to listen and believe them. So, I mean, and I say we, I don't mean myself or you guys or anyone that exercises common sense, but everybody else. And the people who don't know the story. Like, they're literally, when it was on ABC, I was like, my grandma's going to think I'm a fucking terrorist now, you know, because she saw the NBC thing, you know. It's, whatever.
Oh, yeah.
This is the Harvard Humanist Society that's giving her this award, yeah? And they list their values as reason, compassion, creativity, justice, integrity, awareness, environmentalism, feminism, equality, science, progress, and pluralism. Now, if Anita Sarkeesian meets even half of those values, I will break my own ribs, bend over, and bite off my own dick.
Ugh.
Is that a thing you can do in one
Please don't.
Because reason, seriously, she never backs up anything she says with statistics. Compassion, arguable, but if she's a con artist, definitely not. Creativity, certainly doesn't value that. Justice, certainly doesn't value that. Integrity, nope. Awareness, none. Environmentalism, dunno. Feminism, pseudo-feminism, maybe. Equality, certainly not. Science, nope. Progress, nope. Pluralism, depends what you mean by that. There's just no way. She doesn't meet any of their values. They're doing it as a publicity grab. That can be the only reason for it.
Yep.
1 second. I usually don't break in like this, but compassion? Compassion? We did an entire Hangout segment about an article that Hannah Wallen did regarding Anita Sarkeesian's murdergasm when the school shooting happened just a few months ago. She was tweeting promoting her agenda and her feminist ideological bigotry regarding quote-unquote toxic masculinity while the kids were still on the operating table fighting for their lives. Compassion? None.
Okay, thank you for that poignant and passionate
true, though.
observation.
It's
Yeah, it
true.
is true. I agree, Doge. It's true.
Now, what about the Sank and Karen?
Oh, okay, yes. Well, I didn't actually watch Sink and Karen yet, but she did talk to me after she did the interview with the Young Turks, and she informed me that despite their technical difficulties, they didn't actually have a video of her. She was smiling the entire time as Sink just went full idiot on her.
I do have a comment posted to YouTube. I said to Senk, dude, never walk into a gunfight with your pants around your ankles.
Oh, man.
The problem with the discussion was that Sank was trying to, and I mean, what he was trying to do, what he was trying to establish starting points of the discussion. Basically to say, this is what we agree on in terms of gender, and this is what we don't, where we might separate. And he got hung up. Basically, when they got to male versus female genital mutilation, he basically tried to write off male genital mutilation as less serious. Basically doing what most people do. He was like, well, there's health reasons and, yada yada. But female genital mutilation, that's all about dominance. And Karen explained how there are parts of the world where there are studies that make the claim that female genital mutilation is also for all of these supposed benefits. And that her ultimate point is to say, genital mutilation across the board is shitty, and it should be treated the same, period. And so and then Sank, he basically he shifted the goalposts. He was like, well, let's just agree that that all comes from religion, and we know religion sucks, and it's basically I'm a liberal and this is what I'm supposed to believe, and I'm just gonna say it. And that's fine. I knew he would make it about something else, and then. But when they got towards the end, he was just trying to basically get Karen to acknowledge that if it wasn't for feminists, specifically women, she wouldn't have the vote. And he basically made it, he said, women got you the vote. Can you at least acknowledge that? And she was like, well, no, that's not really that easy because, and then she explained all this shit, and he was like, blah, blah. He was literally saying blah, blah, blah. In the interview, because he was like, I don't want to hear any more of this. He turned into Bill O'Reilly, basically. And when Bill O'Reilly does it, it's humorous, but this was just kind of sad. And by the end of it, he was yelling at her and telling her to thank feminism. She has to thank feminism. And she was like, I haven't voted in 14 years, personally, and you don't have to be a badass bitch. You can be a badass bitch without voting. And I'm like, yeah, you can do that if you, there you go. So, yeah, I mean, he called her a radical, essentially cut her off, and then just ended the show because he could not wrap his head around starting the argument any way other than the way he wanted to start it, and so therefore he couldn't continue. He did say he'd bring her back on, but I'd be surprised if they did. And thankfully, the comments are, as Nefenor put it, roasting his ass alive. Hopefully, it really gets around. So, guys in the chat, check it out and comment. And I can't tell you what to do, but I would recommend exercising reason and just because we have that on our side. So,
well,
go, Allison. Sorry.
Yes, I know. Yes, the Doge. Okay, so. From what I have gleaned from the fumes coming off of that video, he's trying to force her to thank feminism, but that requires her accepting an identity of a victim as a woman.
Well, yeah, and then on top of that, he told her at one point, either thank feminism or go make me a sandwich. I was like, are you fucking kidding me, dude?
What the hell is he going to use to force her to make a sandwich?
No, I mean, this is
Way to
silly.
perpetuate the idea that men can't self-police and self-govern, that they need feminism in order to keep them in line.
Well,
I just
that's
totally played into their hand.
I'd
well,
like to see
that's
anyone try and force Karen to make a sandwich.
yeah,
I'm
exactly.
sure they'll
Well,
be delicious, but only when she wants to make them.
Yeah, that's the exact point. Like, what are you going to use to force Karen to make you a sandwich, Sink? Your male privilege? I'd like to see you try. I'd like to see any man use so-called patriarchal powers or male privilege to force any woman to do anything. It's not going to happen. It's not.
Yeah. It's funny because he literally implied something sexist by he was trying to accuse her of being, internally having knees with water in them.
Oh, the soggy knees?
The soggy knees, yes, on the inside. He wanted her to acknowledge that she was that way by basically drawing this line in the sand, saying you either love feminism or you're a misogynist. And that's that binary thinking. It's like that doesn't make any sense, and it's really sexist. I mean, that's the irony of it, is basically using sexism to try to accuse people of sexism, which is what he did. And if Karen would have said, "Make me a falafel," he would have been offended.
But like the point is that he's trying to foist an identity of victimhood on Karen. It's not going to work, first of all, but it's also incredibly frickin' misogynist. Well, I mean, not in the true sense of the term of hating women. Well, maybe. Actually, I think that behavior actually could legitimately rise to the term misogynist. Trying to browbeat her. To browbeat her to submit to the way he wants to see a woman, which is, as a damsel, is reduced down to a victim. And yeah, that's pretty sexist.
He couldn't handle it. He couldn't handle that truth, basically. I mean, that idea that Karen was so independent and so free-thinking, and many of us are, right? So independent and so free-thinking that she could actually have the gall to say, I don't need any of this shit that you guys think I need. That is what we want to do, right? That's the goal. But it was too much. He was like, no, that's not okay. You have to want freedom and you have to want equality, but you have to never really get it, because if you do, then we can't talk about this anymore.
Well, if she does get freedom and equality, if she does recognize that she has it and the power that she has, then she doesn't need Sink for a damn fucking thing. Yeah, and that's where we're at. Women do not need you, Sink. We don't need you for fucking anything. And maybe you actually need us. For once in your life, maybe you're the damsel. Anyway, go ahead, observing libertarian.
Well, I was just loving this discourse that's going on, and I'd like to point out, feminism in and of itself is based on misogyny. And I mean genuine hatred or being hateful of women. It absolutely enforces the point that women are weak and therefore easily controlled by men, and therefore men were able to create the patriarchy. That is the central totem pole upon which feminism is based. That's the center stone, if you understand, a bit about building manufacture. That is the cornerstone, the center stone of feminism, that women are essentially weak and that men were therefore able to control women and always have since the beginning of time. Feminism is based upon misogyny. You can't escape the fact, because the minute you bring up patriarchy, you enforce the conceptual idea that women are weak and therefore easily controlled by men, and therefore have been controlled by men in all aspects of life forever since the beginning of man and woman.
But it's not.
Feminism is misogynist.
It's not an actual but that's not actually due to biological differences. Men have controlled women for all of human history, but not because of biology. That's just because of some thing, aliens. I know it's all your fault, Nephinor. But I wanted to.
It is
I
not.
wanted to say. I wanted to say, Sour Grape was saying in the chat, she doesn't think that Sync is misogynist because he likes women, and I think there's a difference you can make. I think he likes the idea of Sync saving women, but does he like women? Well, he doesn't like Karen because she doesn't need to be saved. So draw your own conclusions. But we gotta end this. What do you think, Doge? I think it's time. It's good. Is it good?
Yeah, I think it's good. It was one other thing I wanted to say real quick. That apparently Sink, I'm going to say sink, like kitchen sink, guys. That's how I'm going to pronounce it. Because he threw everything at her but the kitchen sink, and it didn't work. So that's why I'm going to use that. But anyway, when they did a show, the Young Turks, about the grass eaters in Japan, and this was a while back, and Sink essentially just dismissed the whole thing, like, no, like that shouldn't be, I don't know, like that shouldn't be a problem or whatever. He said, I'm looking at somebody in the chat brought it up, so I wanted to quickly read it. Basically, 2% of guys are asexual. That's fine. God love them. But 33% of asexual? No, man, that's weak. That's not living. Essentially shaming the men for not, for being grass eaters. And it just goes to show the level of cognitive dissonance that you could have when you could say, well, who cares? We don't need. We could use a lower population, or we don't need that many men being happy, and like that would just, you can just think that, and it doesn't even like kick in as something that sounds wrong, and then so I just want to throw that out there, and I think that unless anyone else wants to say any like final thoughts, I'm gonna.
I'd like to pull out Observing Libertarians' comment. Sink, sank, and sunk. That pretty much concludes that. So let's call it because we got people who got to get going and because they have lives and shit. Unlike me, but other people have lives.
Yeah. Do you have any last? Mr. James, is there anything that you would like to tell to the audience, like maybe to like find your products, the name of your company, what your website is, things like that?
My company name is Postmortem Studios. I also work with Chronicle City. My personal website is postmortemstudios.wordpress.com, and that's got links to all my shit all over the place. I love talking to people. I'm on Twitter @Grimachu, so yeah, say hi. I'll say hi back. I'm always up for talking about things.
Awesome. And that was something. Oh, I want to play this game. Should we? I was thinking, Allison. I know I'm doing this on the air, and I hope that this doesn't upset you, but should we do a stream where we play a game?
I think we could. I have to work out XSplit or something so that we can actually stream the game. Otherwise, I think it'd be really boring.
Let's play the Gamergate game. James, do you want to play that?
Yeah, we need to purchase one.
So. Two-player only, unfortunately, but
that's fine.
Yeah, me and the Doge can, and the rest of you guys can comment.
Yeah, or how long will? Yeah, I mean, or Sour can play. I mean, that's fine too. It doesn't matter. She's like saying I want to play, and Nephinor wants to play too. We should. Okay. I think we should figure that out.
We can have a tournament of. Two groups together, and then the winner plays the others, etc., etc.
How long does it take to play a game, James? Like, what's the average?
If you play to 3 points, basically, it shouldn't take more than about half an hour.
Oh, okay.
We can't have an entire. Well, I guess we. I don't know if people would tolerate an entire tournament of.
It's a Gamergate one, though. I think they would.
Okay, yeah, maybe.
It's like I want to play this game with the cards while wearing the shirt that the guy got in trouble for laying the comet, the probe on the comet. I want to do it while doing that in my Bill Cosby rape robe and no pants.
Yes. Oh yes, that's yeah.
With spaghetti in my pocket and a cheese pizza that has no fucking pineapple on it because fuck pineapple on your pizza.
Yeah. Just all the horrible things. Are you also gonna have like baby seal eye headlights
You
on
do
your Cadillac.
realize, of course, that we are the meat rights advocates, MRAs.
Are we?
Oh, and I have a fedora. I gotta have the fedora, so I'm all set.
Yeah.
Maybe I'll try.
And-
Well, what about us, the ladies? What do we wear to be shitlordettes?
You guys are actually not ladies. You are sock puppets. So you have to basically wear.
That's right.
giant
I'll wear my
sock
sock monkey hat and
Yes.
my sock monkey gloves.
Stop trying to fool us into believing that you are women. You are not.
I'm not a real woman. Men speak for me. I
You
have
are-
no opinions of my own. I've never gamed in my life.
If you had a
Et
name,
cetera.
it would be Jim Henson, because you are a puppet.
Yeah,
In space.
So speaks the guy with the dog head, the Doge.
Yes.
So
This is
speaketh the Doge. All
This is-
right.
What about the guy who usually has something up somebody's? Never mind.
Okay, yeah. Let's yeah, okay, shh, quiet. Let's end this because yeah, it's time.
Okay.
All right.
Any
I'm gonna.
final comments? I'm sorry.
No, you know what? Let's stop asking them because then they do have final comments and then it never fucking ends. So it's just yeah. Okay, let's move on. All right. I want to thank everybody for joining us. I want to thank Brian for actually hosting this and James for coming on and tolerating us. It's always great to find a good sport. And I want to thank Sour and Nephenor for popping in last minute, and yeah, Anna for joining us, and everybody else who's part of the team who helps put this stuff on and works like little mice on wheels in the background. And let's see if there's anything else. Oh yes, the shilling. If you like our conversation, if you like having an open forum and talking about the things that the establishment media does not want to talk about, just completely avoids, and also talking about how men and women can have each other's backs, how we can create a better world, but not through coercion, not through fear, not through shame, but through careful analysis, thoughtfulness, creativity, inspiration, and not censoring and not bullying people. But so if you like that kind of thing, if you're open to that kind of thing and you want to be part of it, please do consider patroning us or becoming a volunteer. You can send a message to us at honeybadgers, that's an S, honeybadgersradio@gmail.com if you're interested in volunteering. And if you're interested in helping us out with resources, which is always appreciated, you can find us at www.patreon.com/honeybadgerradio. There are certain perks to patrons. You get to hang out with us after shows, you get to talk with us on Skype. We got a Minecraft server. Oh yes, I was supposed to shill the Minecraft server. The patrons told me to shill the Minecraft server. We have a Minecraft server, so if you were interested in Minecraft, we set the amount at $1 per episode to a minimum of $5 a month, and you can get a spot on our Minecraft server. And also we have a Steam group. It's Honey Badger Radio Gamers with Byte on Steam, so please do check that out. And yeah, if you want to patronize us again, the address is patreon.com/honeybadgerradio. And I want to thank everyone again and say good night before my cat starts meowing, because she's right up by my ear and she's looking up at me and I know it's going to start soon. So good night.